if you've looked into Jen's work, she's run for Congress a couple of times. And one of the people who was in Congress for a time, Andy Levin, who I would never consider to be, like a real populist left progressive type person. He was moderately left for sure, to be fair.
He was a liberal Zio. He was what we would call, he's self-proclaimed liberal Zionist.
But this is a guy who thought that what was happening to the Palestinians was wrong. And so the Israel lobby, on behalf of AIPAC, made a point to put in this total flake of a politician, Haley Stevens, into Congress. And by doing so, they spent millions of dollars doing that deed. And it's not the only one that they've done it with, but this is a clip that I think is going to crystallize for many people just how much of a systemic problem the Israel lobby is in this country, no matter where you are. And this happens to be Michigan.
You know why America's cooked? It's not China. It's not Russia. It's this.
It's your first sport. Yeah. And you're walking with the Congresswoman. Yes. Oh my gosh, please.
Well, thank you so much for your community service.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I was wondering, with all the support of Republicans and people who are anti-choice and people who are working to disrupt our election systems that AIPAC is doing right now, I'm wondering why you're accepting their support. I'm a Jew and my family lives here in this community.
Yeah.
And I really think that those kinds of candidates are making the Jewish people less safe. I'm wondering why you're accepting their
Well, thank you so much for coming and bringing.
Help! 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 That's what she wants to say.
Your kiddo. It's so nice to meet with you.
I'm just wondering, I want to make life and this country a safe place for him to grow up in. I'm wondering why you would want to accept their endorsement and $800,000 in ads this year.
Yeah. I guys, I have received, how many endorsements have I received this election?
A lot.
I think I've got a lot of local labor.
You are a great representative and we really appreciate your support. I'm just hoping
You can use you guys. Oh my God, guys.
She's a bitch to begin with. I know this on good authority. So I'm not really surprised that she would do that. But for her to turn her back to a woman and her child, let me assure you that somebody's going to use this against her politically. And they should, because Haley Stevens is a very opportunistic Democrat, like many. But this is a person who definitely plans to ascend the ladder. And I really think that the Israel lobby is going to be the death of the duopoly politics in this country, because it's showing just how corrupt and bought off these representatives really are. She couldn't even take a slight amount of criticism. And this is coming from somebody who supports her, wasn't trying to be confrontational, was just asking, do you have to take the Israel lobby money? The answer that she doesn't want to say, which of course is what she is supposed to say, is, yeah, I kind of do, because that's just the way things are. That's what she'd like to say if there were no consequences. But she also knows that by even responding to this, it could be used against her, as it should be.
Yeah. Oh, I've seen this. I mean, have you seen this before, like this clip?
No. I'm interested, and I definitely want to dive in and learn a little bit more about like the connection and also the differences between Jewish Zionism and Christian Zionism, because they're just such interesting angles. And, that's kind of what I've been trying to look into, is the money specifically from the Israel lobby, specifically targeting Christian congregations, because the theology behind Christian Zionism has been around for like over a millennia at this point. And I think originally, I mean, I try to talk about this too. I mean, it's anti-Jewish people, anti-Semitic. I know, Jen, you were talking about earlier, you don't always prefer using anti-Semitic when we're talking about... Because the
people, they're not Semites, you know that.
Right, exactly. So, but for lack of better words, anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, the concept of Christian Zionism, even on its theological stance, is in fact anti-Jewish, right? Because it's using the Jewish people as a pawn. I was also taught that if people who practice Judaism don't convert to Christianity, they will spend an eternity in hell, because there's not enough suffering on the actual world. We gotta invent a worse one. And the the reality is, like, it's been, gosh, it's just been so much to unpack. But the theological stance behind Christian Zionism, I think, had its own separateness away from the money behind it and the policy behind it that has been shaped. And I think it was around like the 70s when money was actually pumped into promoting this as something for evangelical Christians to vote about, to mobilize about. And that's kind of like the line where I want to find, like, when did this, not that it was ever, a super moral theological stance in the first place, but just where did that start? Like, why were they mobilized? When were they mobilized, kind of thing? So that's just what it brings to mind. Is I still have so much more to dig into, honestly.
I might be able to share some insight on you when I have some ideas as to, well, we can finish this out, but some ideas as to like the Jewish Zionism versus Christian Zionism. Like, I have some thoughts on that, but
I'm sure. Yeah.
This is not, look at boat. Let's ride the boat.
Oh, I have so many endorsements everywhere. Bye. Yeah, a congresswoman who purports to care about Jewish safety, but won't answer any questions from her own constituents voicing concerns about their safety. That was Representative Haley Stevens, Democrat from Michigan's 11th district. And this may sound like a crazy conspiracy theory, but she was placed in that seat specifically to represent Israel. That's right. Back in 2022, the pro-Israel lobby donated $3 million to her campaign in a safe Democrat district because they wanted to oust the incumbent, Andy Levin, an actual Jewish representative, because they deemed him not pro-Israel enough. Quote, AIPAC has targeted Levin for defeat because while he comes from a well-known Jewish political family and has voiced support for Israel's existence, he has also been sharply critical of that nation's policy towards Palestinians living in Israeli-controlled territories.
I'm really Jewish, but AIPAC can't stand the idea that I am the clearest, strongest Jewish voice in Congress, standing for a simple proposition that there's no way to have a secure democratic homeland for the Jewish people unless we achieve the political and human rights of the Palestinian people.
That is all it takes, folks. The mildest form of criticism, and you're out. To serve in the United States Congress, you must pledge 100% allegiance to Israel. Hence why Haley Stevens, who supposedly cares a lot about Jewish lives, can act with such disdain towards her own Jewish constituents. Once again, to put it bluntly, she is not there to serve the people of Michigan. She is there to serve Israel.
Yeah.
That's shout out to our friend James Lee, who does amazing work. He's been part of Breaking Points with Crystal and Sagar. He also has his own channel, 5149, I think is the name of the channel.
Yeah.
And one thing that we've learned in this whole experience, Kayse, is we should always give credit where credit is due as often as we can to real journalists, because there's not a lot of them out there. And James happens to be one of them. But this goes to show everybody that there is no amount of money that the Israel lobby will not spend to get what they want. And as much as the Democrats have tried to paint this picture that this is a Republican problem, no, this is a United States of America problem. The Republican Party controls Oklahoma. Hence, the Israel lobby is going to buy off all of the Republicans in Oklahoma to do as they say. In a swing state like Michigan, they'll buy off all the Democrats and Republicans that they need to in order to achieve their goals. That's why this system is broken beyond repair. You can't run to one party or the other and think that that's going to save you. It's not. This couldn't be more clear.
Agreed.
Yeah. All right. Do you want to like finish? Like, I mean, do you want to finish this?
Yeah, let's see. We'll finish.
And if AIPAC and the rest of the pro-Israel lobbying apparatus.
And just so you guys know, before we continue, these are all of the pro-Israel nonprofits that exist that have real power here in this country. You know, most of these organizations typically get one or two if they're lucky. This is 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 40, 50. 50 major organizations. Of course, the ADL, you know, GINSA, AIPAC. We know who the worst ones are, but there are so many of these organizations that are out there that have such insane infrastructural, economic, cultural, and political control over all of our politics. And this is something that people should be very aware of if they're not already.
Apparatus even catches wind of a slight waver in your support of Israel, you better watch out.
Here are the top 20 recipients in Congress, the House and the Senate, of AIPAC money in the 2022 midterm cycle, according to Open Secrets. They're members of both parties. They come from every corner of the country with varying levels of experience in Congress. The Democrat Glenn Ivey of Maryland tops the list. He beat out fellow Democrat Donna Edwards in Maryland's House primary after AIPAC poured millions into pro-Ivey advertisements and mailers. Edwards was running for a second stint in Congress after serving during the Obama administration, where she voted present, not even a no, on a number of pro-Israel resolutions. So the money poured in against her.
And next on the list is Thomas Massie of Kentucky to punish him for exposing that every Republican member of Congress has a, quote, AIPAC handler. The last thing I'll say, because I want to leave it on a positive note, a note of action, is to say that for people who maybe don't care to pay attention to politics because it's so depressing, it's a cesspool, I have a tip, a heuristic, and that is the easiest way to decide who to vote for is whichever candidate has raised the least amount of money, because that means they are more beholden to the people who vote for them and not for the people who fund them. My name is James Lee. This is the 5149 Show. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe for more.
Yeah.
A shout out to our guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was great.
So, I mean, we can, I had this thought when you were talking before about the difference between Christian Zionism and Jewish Zionism. So, and there's a lot of confusion in the chat, I think, about where Zionism comes from. So I can sort of do like please don't distract me. I could sort of do like a quick primer on where that is. But the basis of Zionism is secular. The basis of Zionism is not Jewish. Yes, Judaism was used, and it was based in what was actual anti-Semitism going on in Europe at that time, where Jews felt lesser than and felt that because other Europeans didn't consider Jews white. That's where that comes from. So that's why they were considered Semitic, even though they're not Semitic. So this is where that came from. And then the Jews, a lot of the people that were Jewish but secular thought, well, yeah, maybe we'll get respect if we have our own place and our own country and our own language. And so this started this idea of Jewish nationalism, but it was never based on Judaism. Okay. And that's something that is very important for people to understand. There is absolutely nothing in Judaism that supports the concept of a geopolitical Zionist entity. Nothing. In fact, it's the antithesis of Judaism. And I've said that many times on this channel. But where I think the big difference comes from regarding Christian Zionists and Jewish Zionists now is that Christian Zionists, it's religious based. Jewish Zionists, for the majority of Jews that are Zionists, it's not religion based, it's fear based. And it's fear based brainwashing that we have been undergoing from post-Holocaust trauma and 3 generations back. And this is what has happened. So it isn't based on our religion. The very religious Jews, I'm sure you've seen, are not Zionists. The very religious Jews, even the religious Jews in Jerusalem, in Mea Shearim, which is the largest, very Orthodox Jewish neighborhood in Jerusalem, they're not in support of the Zionist state. And most of them have lived there since before the Zionist state. They were just Jewish settlers that wanted to be in the Holy Land. They didn't want to own it and they didn't want it to be a geopolitical thing, right? So that's where people have to distinguish. And the Jews that are now with it, the secular Jews, your Reform Jews, even your conservative Jews in this country, it's all based on generational trauma and fear-based mindset. So I was raised to believe that if there's no Israel, Jews are not safe. We were very much raised with the idea that if you don't like Israel, you're anti-Semitic. And we were also very much with this very white supremacist concept of that there is no Palestinians, they're just Arabs. And also because that's what the early Zionists needed to do in order to get everybody on board, because that was never true. So that was just one of many lies we were told. So I think the Christian Zios, it's religion-based, and the Jewish Zios, it's fear-based. And that's just, you know, my sort of perception of it.